The Brazilian army shows strength at events while Rio de Janeiro bleeds without federal support. Brazil faces an absurd situation. The army shows strength at international events, but Rio remains under daily wars that the government pretends are only a state issue. The lack of military action in the favelas became the image of a country that seems to have given up reacting. Meanwhile, 7,000 soldiers and war equipment are sent to COP30 in Belém, ensuring the safety of heads of state. In the same country, Rio faces drones, shootouts, and barricades without federal help. It's hard to understand why the army avoids the real war and pretends not to see the chaos. Crime spreads through Rio as the army ignores the urban war consuming the country. The armed forces prefer ceremonial missions while crime spreads and turns entire neighborhoods into lawless zones. Governors ask for help, generals back off, and the people pay the price. You can feel the gap between Brazil's military strength and the fear to use it. The contrast is glaring. The army protects international conferences but ignores the war inside its own country. Troops only move with a presidential decree, as if events were more important than lives. In the end, silence became part of the strategy, and the problem keeps growing. Brazil displays power in Belém, while Rio's favelas live under war and abandonment. How long will Brazil accept soldiers painting curbs while traffickers control entire territories? Be brave to answer. Do you still believe this country can change? Just a reminder, this report is based on news from Sky News, The New York Times, BBC, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, Sputnik, RT News, and Telegram. But before we get into the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription means a lot and helps you stay updated on every story about the raging nations. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help this project grow even more. The army keeps refusing to act in Rio's favelas, claiming it can only move with a presidential decree. Even with armored vehicles idle and troops without missions, the government prefers to let chaos grow rather than take political risks. In the most critical moment, the state stands alone and without real support. Generals claim their troops aren't trained for urban warfare, but that's hard to believe. These are soldiers with international experience and cutting-edge technology. The legal argument sounds more like an excuse to avoid backlash. Meanwhile, crime advances and the government keeps pretending not to see. The crisis worsened when Claudio Castro demanded armored vehicles to stop drug trafficking. The request was denied again, citing the lack of a law and order guarantee decree. The governor was left without support and the people without protection. Rio is fighting a war without allies. At the end of 2024, the Navy even used armored vehicles, but only to protect a military hospital after a doctor's death. When official buildings are hit, action is immediate. But when civilians die, the state hides behind legal paperwork and political speeches. The contrast is glaring. This standoff has become embarrassing. The same army that mobilizes troops for COP30 refuses to fight the crime controlling Rio. Armored vehicles protect conferences while silence meets the blood on the streets. The question is inevitable: who does military power really serve? The army refuses to act in Rio's favelas, even with idle troops and armored vehicles. Commanders claim that without the law and order guarantee, each soldier could be held responsible for killing someone in an operation. But for many, that sounds like an excuse to stay out. The fear of backlash has become greater than the duty to act, and the urban war goes unanswered by the military. Today, Rio looks like a battlefield without leadership. While soldiers march in ceremonies, state police fight alone against criminals with automatic rifles. The feeling is one of total abandonment. The army, which should protect the country, limits itself to watching chaos on television. Even so, some military officers believe the army should intervene. They point out that Brazil has Guarani armored vehicles, attack helicopters, and drones capable of securing areas in hours. The issue isn't strength, it's the lack of courage to use what's already ready. In the past, the government used the law and order guarantee without hesitation to ensure safety during crises and events. Today, the topic became taboo. Authorities prefer to avoid international criticism rather than confront crime head-on. The result is a country afraid to act, hostage to its own omission. The atmosphere of revolt in Rio grows daily. Police and residents demand action, but the federal government remains trapped in reports and technical speeches. In the coming days, pressure will rise and may force Brasilia to decide if the army still exists to protect the people. Brazil moves troops to COP30, but leaves Rio de Janeiro to violence. Claudio Castro tried a desperate move. He suggested that the military police operate army armored vehicles to fight traffickers. The idea was seen as absurd by officers who reminded that it's illegal without a presidential decree. The proposal exposed the desperation of a cornered government with no real support. The formal request included vehicles, operators, and mechanics but was quickly denied. The Attorney General's office reinforced that without the law and order guarantee, nothing can be done. The result was the same as always: bureaucracy on paper, gunfire in the streets, and people caught in the crossfire. Within the armed forces, Castro's proposal became a joke. Generals found it amateurish and saw it as an attempt to shift blame for the crisis to the federal government. In the end, no one wants to take responsibility for a state that already seems completely out of control. Castro responded by saying that Rio is living a real war and the situation goes beyond local police capacity. He demanded from the federal government the same effort shown in international missions, stating that the state is fighting alone against an enemy with heavy weapons and solid territory. In Brasilia, the speech caused irritation, but also revealed what everyone already knows: public security and national security overlap, and no one wants to admit it. Rio stands alone in a war that the government insists on calling a local problem. How long can they pretend it's not their responsibility? The government protects Belém with military forces while Rio sinks into war and blood. The chaos in Rio has become a challenge to the very idea of national sovereignty. Crime sets rules, controls territories, and acts as a parallel power, while the federal government pretends it's a state issue. It's a convenient denial that turns abandonment into security policy. While armored vehicles rust in warehouses and helicopters sit idle, troops trained for urban combat remain without mission. Bureaucracy has defeated strategy. The population, unprotected, lives amid gunfire and closed schools, paying the price of a state that prefers waiting over acting. In a press conference, Castro said Rio cannot face alone groups armed with rifles, grenades, and drones. Without army support, the war against drug trafficking became an unequal fight. The state government battles with limited ammunition while Brasilia watches from afar, indifferent. Even under pressure, the federal government repeats the same speech. It claims it never denied help, but that help is just loaned equipment and symbolic national force presence. What's missing isn't structure, it's decision. And without decision, crime keeps winning on the battlefield. Behind the scenes, officers assure that the army could retake control in a few hours if authorized. Armored vehicles, drones, and logistics are ready. The problem was never capacity, but political will. The order the country waits for doesn't depend on strength, it depends on courage. The Brazilian army abandons Rio de Janeiro, while Belém enjoys full protection. The new mega operation against the Comando Vermelho began before dawn, with thousands of agents surrounding the Penha and Alemao communities. Within hours, dozens were dead, including some police officers. The state government called it the biggest operation in history, but for residents, it was just another day of terror. Residents described the scene as total war, non-stop gunfire, drones dropping explosives, and streets blocked by burning barricades. Many fled without knowing where to go. During the night, dozens of bodies were taken to a public square. The Rio government justified the operation as the result of long, detailed investigations. Rifles, drugs, and key criminals were seized, but the negative toll is impossible to hide. Even with victory speeches, the image of war speaks louder. Violence reignited the debate over the collapse of public security. Each operation leaves more dead and no lasting results. Local forces are exhausted and the army remains absent, watching a metropolis in a state of war, and no one seems willing to change that. The federal government denies Rio's requests, while urban war turns the city into a battle zone. The federal prosecutor's office and the public defender demanded explanations from the governor. They want proof of less lethal alternatives, planning, and ambulances on site. They also require evidence that the government followed Supreme Court orders on body cameras and formal justifications for the raid. Castro responded by attacking the Supreme Court, calling the restrictions damned and claiming they protect criminals. He says the rules imposed by the judiciary hinder the police and strengthen drug gangs. The clash became a power struggle, with both sides trying to shift blame for the war. The Justice Minister said the federal government never denied support and that the armed forces are available, but only with a formal request. The statement felt bureaucratic and detached, failing to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. In the end, it left a sense of total abandonment. Even after more than 100 deaths, nothing concrete was done by the federal government. Authorities called the operation cruel, but stopped there. The country seems anesthetized, accepting organized crime as routine. Fear has become part of Rio's landscape. In the next moments, what comes ahead will show how deep Rio can sink, how the Comando Vermelho gains strength, and why, even after so many operations, the state remains trapped in the same cycle of blood, failure, and empty promises. Rio de Janeiro has become Brazil's biggest urban battlefield without any real military support. The Comando Vermelho has become Rio's most powerful faction, controlling favelas, drug routes, and even services like internet and gas. It operates as a parallel state, enforcing its own rules and wielding more power than the government. Where the official presence vanished, crime filled the void and built its own system. This faction started inside a prison in the 1970s and grew until it spread across the entire country. What began with a resistance speech turned into a billion-dollar network of drug trafficking and money laundering. Today, the Comando Vermelho operates even outside Brazil, commanding crime in nearly every state. In recent years, the group expanded its control into areas that previously had no factions. Its firepower grew too. Automatic rifles, grenades, and even drones carrying explosives became part of daily life. The state, trapped in its own inertia, never kept up with this evolution. The lack of constant security presence created a vacuum that crime filled with organization and power. The police enter only to confront, then leave, and traffickers take control again. This absence of the state turned drug trafficking into a local economic engine. While the army watches from afar, people live between fear and neglect. The government uses the law as a shield to justify its inaction. With every operation, the death toll rises, but criminal control remains the same. The cycle of violence and abandonment seems endless. The Red Command grows as the army watches from afar while people die unprotected. 15 years after the operation that was supposed to free the Alemao complex, Rio is reliving the same nightmare. The current operation repeats the past mistakes: armored vehicles in the streets, dozens of deaths, and a feeling of defeat. That Brazilian flag, once a symbol of victory, now represents abandonment and failure. At the time, the country celebrated images of criminals fleeing the hills and the flag raised atop the cable car. It seemed like the end of an era, but the same hills have once again become strongholds of the Comando Vermelho, now with criminals more armed, organized, and fearless than ever. Experts say crime has completely changed its strategy. In the past, traffickers avoided direct confrontations. Now they face the state with drones, explosives, and high-caliber rifles. What was once symbolic control has become an actual military occupation in the communities. Colonel Alessandro Visacro points out that gangs now defend territory like organized armies. Former Secretary Jose Vicente da Silva says the current scenario is the portrait of public policy failure. The state limited itself to police raids and abandoned any lasting occupation plan. The 2010 operation was supposed to consolidate state control, but the discontinuation of the UPPs paved the way for the return of drug trafficking. Today, history repeats itself. Quick offensives, mass deaths, and no permanent presence. Rio once again lives the war it swore would never return. Rio de Janeiro still bleeds between drones, explosives, and rifles while the government looks away. The country is once again debating the role of the armed forces in a war the government insists on denying. Rio, dominated by fear and criminal factions, shows the total failure of public security. The army's absence is no longer neutral. It has become part of the problem fueling violence. Meanwhile, Belém lives the opposite reality: total security, armored vehicles in the streets, and high-level planning for COP30. The contrast is outrageous. The government is efficient at protecting foreign leaders, but ignores its own people. Official silence has become the sound of a country that chose its priorities. Governors change, ministers come and go, but the logic remains the same. Short operations, long massacres, and no consistent policy. Favelas turn into independent territories while the state pretends not to see. Without federal action, Rio's war will keep being treated as a local tragedy. People watch helplessly as tanks, planes, and helicopters remain idle. Brazil shows strength on international stages, but weakness and hesitation at home. It's an unsustainable contradiction, and everyone already knows the question no one dares to answer. How long will Brazil accept soldiers painting curbs while traffickers control entire territories? Be honest, do you think this country still has the courage to change that? Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of the video. You're awesome, and I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any updates on the raging nations. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help this project grow even more.